Hello and welcome everybody, and thanks very much for joining our session today. My name is Alison Thornburn. I work for Good Return, which is an Australian NGO specialising in financial inclusion, working in Asia and the Pacific. Firstly, I'd like to introduce members of the team from Good Return and our partners who are going to be presenting today. So firstly, Shane Nichols, the CEO of Good Return, will be introducing Good Return and our topic for today. And then Fifi Rishando, Impact Investment Manager at Good Return, and Fika Rahima, who's the Sustainability and Impact Lead at our partner Crowdy in Indonesia, will be giving our first case study. And finally, Paul Soro from Shamron Microfinance in Cambodia will present our second case study. So at Good Return, to achieve our mission, we work with our partners to ensure that everybody has equal access to financial services by embedding principles of gender equity, disability inclusion, and social inclusion, or GEDSI. What we want to do today is to get behind that acronym and really give some real-life examples of how we're collaborating with our partners to enable the financial and economic inclusion of women and people with disabilities, and how technology can help to enable this. I'll be monitoring the Swapcard platform, so if you post any questions there, we'll pick them up in the Q&A session at the end after the presentations. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Shane to start our presentation.
Thanks, Alison. Hi, everybody, and welcome to our session. I'll start by introducing Good Return and what we do. So Good Return works across the Asia-Pacific region, and our mission is to enable people who are marginalised and excluded to achieve economic empowerment through responsible financial inclusion and also capability development. So as you can see in this diagram, our work focuses on three areas. The first is the responsible inclusive finance work, which builds the skills of local financial institutions to make their services more inclusive and to meet standards for responsible service provision, as well as helping them to address barriers for potential customers who might be excluded from access to finance and markets. Second, we support the delivery of financial education and business skills. So we can help customers manage their money and their small businesses and understand their rights and responsibilities as financial consumers. And then our Access to Finance program uses loans and guarantees to assist our partners to expand their lending out to entrepreneurs who are excluded and marginalised, especially women and people with disabilities. As we're accredited as an NGO, and we also hold a financial services licence that enables us to raise and deploy investment funds. On to the next slide, you'll see that we've developed a theory of change that articulates how our work contributes to impact on our partner organisations and their economically excluded clients. It also provides a way of assessing our progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals and guides us in our partnership selection and development. So our work is most closely aligned with SDGs 1, 5, 8, and 17. Gender equality and disability inclusion intersects with each of these goals. So there's the intersection of poverty and disability, the intersection of disability and gender, economic opportunities for women and people with disabilities, and also partnerships with organisations of people with disabilities. Leave no one behind is the central promise of the Sustainable Development Goals, and in working to mainstream gender equality and disability and social inclusion within our programs, we're making a commitment as an organisation to leave no one behind. The next slide just sets the context for the digital divide that we're tackling. There is a huge divide when it comes to access to digital channels and information. We know that in the Asia-Pacific region, there's a 24% gap in internet usage between men and women. And research has shown that people who are less educated, poorer, or live in rural areas are less likely to have access to the internet. So these factors actually further disadvantage women and girls and people with disabilities. In addition, many people with disabilities face other barriers to using digital channels because they're not accessible, especially people with visual, hearing, or cognitive impairments. For instance, in Asia Pacific, only 40% of government public websites are reported as being accessible for people with disabilities. I'm now going to hand over to Fifi Rashando. Fifi will share some aspects of our gender lens investing partnership with Crowdy, which uses a blended finance approach to support digital transformation in Indonesia.
Thank you, Shane. In Indonesia, since December 2020, Good Return established a gender lens investing partnership with Crowdy. Since then, Crowdy started SME unsecured lending to entrepreneurs in the agricultural sector using Good Returns loan guarantees. Here is a video of Mrs. Imas, a chili agripreneur in Indonesia who now has access to market opportunities, capital, as well as digitalization. This video was produced by Gary, a photographer in Indonesia with a disability. One of his hands is paralyzed following an accident 14 years ago. Good Return encourages people with disabilities to take footage and photos of women-owned businesses. Part of this strategy has led Good Return to encourage both disabled and able-bodied video editors and photographers to offer their services as part of our impact investing data collection. Here is the video.
Nepangkeun abi Bu Imas di Desa Simpang, Kecamatan Cikajang, Kabupaten Garut. Abi petani cabe dari tahun 2012. Ya, abi gaduh lahan 5 patok, dikerjakan sama-sama sareng si bapak. Perawatan tanam cabe, tanam, dicor, ngaramas, ngobat. Biasanya kalau usum hujan mah batangna hararideng, jadi busuk tangkal. Kalau masuk masa panen, cabai seminggu 2 kali, hari Kamis sama Senin. Dipanennya seminggu 2 kali. Sekali panen 5 kilo, 10 kilo, kemarin mencapai 30 kali, kan seminggu 2 kali. Dibawa ke warehouse, di sortir. Abi aya bantosan di pihak Crowdy berbentuk bibit, uang, pupuk, obat, mulsa. Selain dari itu di pihak Crowdy aya nu ngabantosan seperti FA nanyain keluhan-keluhan tanaman di kebun. Abi oge sok aya bantosan pelatihan di Crowdy seperti saring-saring sareng petani deui atana PFA padamel di Crowdy. Ya alhamdulillah bisanya kan ibu di dia muruhkeun lah. Jadi kan aya dana buat muruhkeun orang, buat buruh. Jadi terbantu.
Good Return's gender lens investing uses blended finance approach has been proven to have a high impact that stimulates inclusive financing, improves lender confidence, advances digitalization, and stimulates SME financing to create employment opportunities for the excluded, particularly women. In 2021, Good Return was awarded Impact Market Builder of the Year from the Impact Investment Summit Asia Pacific. The COVID pandemic has heavily impacted the economies of Indonesia, and jeopardize hard-won gains in the fight against poverty. Next slide, please. As of June 2022, 2,035 jobs have been created and sustained. In the midst of the pandemic, 255 SMEs in chili, maize, cucumber, and paddy value chains have received 9.5 billion rupiahs in unsecured loans from Crowdy using our loan guarantees. 90% of these SMEs, the loans went to women. I will now hand over to Vika to share Crowdy's digitalization strategies in agricultural value chain financing. Vika?
Thanks, Fifi. Okay, so basically, Crowdy, we try to revolutionize the agriculture by creating more effective and efficient supply chain. So we are not digitizing farmers, but we create the digitalized agriculture. So we create a system to accelerate the data gathering so farmers can easily apply for loans, and then we analyze the data. And then we also try to speed up the process for these farmers to get loans. And we also help to ensure the quality of the harvest, and we also connect them to the off-taker. Next slide, please. So our financing model using cashless disbursement, this way we can try to mitigate the risk. We also provide close monitoring by our agents. And then we also give them insurance bundle program. And also we connect these farmers to the off-takers with a very fair trade. So these borrowers, they will know that how much the amount of the year repayment that they will have to pay. So that way their harvest is secured. Next slide, please. So back in 2021, Crowdy and Good Return, we did the gender value chain analysis for the chili commodity in West Java, Indonesia, and here are some findings from the study. So actually, in terms of decision making for loan applications, the husbands are the main decision makers, and they play a very significant role in managing the capital obtained from the loans. But however, the woman's household responsibility is extended into the bookkeeping for the business, and they also play a greater role in this one aspect to manage the income from the harvest sale. So that's pretty much about the gender lens work with Good Return that Crowdy has been doing. And next, Paul will share his experience in disability inclusion mainstreaming in Cambodia.
Thank you, Fika. So hi, everybody. My name is Paul Thoreau. I'm a Credit Plus Manager at Shamron Microfinance PLC. Shamron being a non-deposit taking microfinance institution in Cambodia. So we partnered with Good Return in 2019 to build a project around financial inclusion for people with disability that I will present the details just next. So next slide, please. So a bit of a context. So around the world, it is estimated that 15% of the population is having some form of disability, which it's more or less the equivalent to the population of China. So in terms of financial exclusion, it appears that people with disability, 28% of people with disability consider that banks are not accessible in developing countries. That microfinance providers reported that less than 0.5% of their clients are people with disability. In Fiji, 19% of people with disability said they had no access to financial services. And from our need assessment, which we'll discuss a bit later, 30% of people with disability said they had used a financial product, and only 14% have used a loan product in the past. Next slide, please. So in terms of the barriers that people with disability have in their accessing financial services, it's firstly a physical barriers. So distances from the services, transportation issues are key for people with disability. The access to the buildings are, of course, an issue, but also access to counters and ATMs. So to manage this, digital accessibility can be, of course, a barrier removal. This said, this also can create other barriers. We will see this later, but especially for impairments such as visual and cognitive, it could be an issue. Another barriers is the social attitudes of staff and of policies of financial providers that can create also wrong perceptions and further barriers to people with disability. Finally, information, leaflets and other communication material, if not put into the appropriate formats, can become a barrier for people with disability. Next slide, please. So talking about the survey, the need assessment survey that we built, or we made at the beginning of to inform our project. So we surveyed 513 people with disabilities, equally distributed between men and women, and we found that actually people with disability have low level of education, at least those that we surveyed. 80% did not complete secondary school, and 67% had experienced barriers in accessing education and training. We also figured that they had low financial confidence and capabilities. 76% of them not tracking their household finance, and 63 reporting having no confidence to take financial decisions. Also, in terms of income generating and employment, we figured that 39% only are employed and 16% run a business. We also discovered through this survey that 70% had never used a financial product, that only 14% had used a loan in the past, that 35% have been denied a credit, and that 38% said that it was because of their disability. This said, 46% of them mentioned an interest to receive a loan for business purposes. Next slide, please. So now we want to run this video of Ratana's story. So Ratana has been involved in our project as a coach for the financial education program, but also as a person with disability recipient of our loan program. Please play if you can play the video.
ខ្ញុំឈ្មោះវ៉ែនរតនាពិការភាពរបស់ខ្ញុំគឺបូលីយ៉ូស្វិតដៃជើងហ្នឹងអញ្ចឹងខ្ញុំអត់អាចដើរបានដូចអ្នកដទៃទៀតទេអញ្ចឹងវាប៉ះពាល់ដល់ជីវិតរស់នៅប្រចាំថ្ងៃរបស់ខ្ញុំច្រើនដែរខ្ញុំចាប់ផ្ដើមធ្វើការនៅ PPCIL ហ្នឹងដូចជាតាំងពីចុងឆ្នាំ2009 Good Return បានតាក់ទងមកខាង PPCIL ថាគាត់មានកម្រោងនេះមួយអញ្ចឹងទៅហើយគាត់ចង់ឲ្យមានអ្នកណាម្នាក់ដែលទៅចូលរួមនៅក្នុងកម្មវិធីហ្នឹងដើម្បីក្លាយទៅជាគ្រូបង្គោលកម្មវិធីប្រវត្តិហ្នឹងគឺឲ្យយើងហ្នឹងមានទម្លាប់ក្នុងការកត់ត្រាការចាយវាយរបស់យើងហ្នឹងដើម្បីឲ្យយើងហ្នឹងដឹងពីការចំណាយហើយនឹងចំណូលពិតប្រាកដរបស់យើងខ្ញុំសប្បាយរីករាយក្នុងការផ្ដល់វគ្គបណ្ដុះបណ្ដាលហ្នឹងបន្តទៅឲ្យពួកគាត់ខ្ញុំមានសិប្បកម្មផលិតសាប៊ូលាងចានពីព្រោះតែប្រាក់កម្ចីហ្នឹងវាមានទំហំល្មមអាចឲ្យខ្ញុំយកមក ធ្វើការពង្រីកអាជីវកម្មរបស់ខ្ញុំហ្នឹងខ្ញុំយកប្រាក់កម្ចីហ្នឹងយកមកទិញម៉ូតូកង់3ដើម្បីធ្វើការដឹកជញ្ជូនផលិតផលដែលខ្ញុំផលិតបានហ្នឹងយកទៅចែកចាយពេលដែលអតិថិជនគេធ្វើការកម្មងច្រើនអីខ្ញុំអត់អាចដឹកបានទេព្រោះខ្ញុំមានជិះម៉ូតូកង់3ឆ្នៃផ្សេងម៉ូតូកង់3ដែលខ្ញុំមានរាល់ថ្ងៃហ្នឹងអាចឲ្យខ្ញុំដឹកទៅឲ្យអតិថិជនបានម្ដងច្រើនឥឡូវវាដំណើរការបានល្អជាងមុនពីព្រោះដោយសារតែយើងអាចចែកចាយបានច្រើនស្រួលជាងមុនខ្ញុំចង់ឲ្យមានជនពិការច្រើនទៀតគាត់មានលទ្ធភាពអាចប្រើប្រាស់ loan ដូចខ្ញុំអញ្ចឹងដែរដើម្បីយកទៅសម្រេចនៅផែនការផ្ទាល់ខ្លួនរបស់គាត់អាចសាកល្បងតាក់ទងជាមួយនឹងកម្ចីរបស់ចម្រើនដើម្បីយកទៅធ្វើការដំណើរការមុខរបររបស់គាត់
Next slide, please. So as you could see at the end of our videos, we had a lot of logos there, and this is also because to build this program, this project, we used an inclusive design and delivery approach, making sure that at all stage of the project we include people with disabilities, OPDs, the Organization of People with Disabilities, but also NGOs and actors within the disability sector. So for the need assessment, we ensure that enumerators were people with disabilities. We also used or employed people with disabilities as enumerators for the participants of our education program. And for the NGOs, we requested their services for the accessibility audits of our branch, but also to adapt goods returns, financial literacy material. So that was important for our approach. Next slide, please. So the program per se had two components, both of them being closely integrated the one to another. On one side, we adapted goods return financial literacy program called CAFE, Consumer Awareness and Financial Empowerment Coaching Program. So the first was to adapt it, make sure that the material and the exercises were adapted for people with disability, which we did in collaboration with a social business named Agile. But also train the coaches, so staff from Shamron, to make sure they are knowledgeable about how to deliver this material, but also and especially on how to communicate and how to understand the needs of people with disability. On the second layer of the program was to make financial services accessible. So we designed a loan program with some kind of subsidy for those that attended the coaching program, but also for the loan purpose, part of the amount was accessible to eventually adapt any assistive device required. We removed the collateral requirements for this specific loan, and we make sure that the accessibility of our services were there all across. So we adapted branches, pilot branches, but also in terms of payments, we made it possible payments through money transfer and at client home. Finally, we gathered data on vulnerability assessment to make sure we could monitor and follow up those clients. Next slide, please. So the project at a wider level included the accessibility of our branches. So we first started with audits in collaboration with the NGO Humanity and Inclusion, and then made the adaptations. So we started with 4 branches. So put ramps, adapted the counters, the bathroom, and all sign all across the branches to make sure that they were a bit more people with disability accessible and friendly. We also engage, and so far we have 7 branches adapted. We ensured that our staff will receive trainings about accessibility awareness, how to communicate, understanding of people with disability. So this includes face-to-face training to our frontline staff, but also we are in the process, so we design a e-learning course that is rolled out at the organization level. And finally, at the medium to long term, so we you can see in the pictures here, we engage with an NGO named Light for the World into a scorecard of where we stand at accessibility inclusion at Cameroon. And with the result from this assessment, the idea is to engage into an inclusion action plan through the next few years, 3 to 5 years, so that we can have this this organizational transition. Next slide, please. So getting into how digitalization can help us through or becoming more inclusive of people with disability. So firstly, at Cameroon, we are testing a digital branch which use new technologies, so that we can have all the assessment and repayments through these branches. So that's one thing. On the training side, Good Return already has developed My Money Tracker, which is an app enabling users to manage their daily finances, which is available through mobile app. But also they are in the process of making their curriculum available through app, which will remove or we hope can remove entry barriers for people with disability. Finally, there is also in Cambodia several use of digital tools that it's enabling understanding better people with disabilities. So the Cambodian government is right now testing an application to gather information about the sector of activities, employment status, and other information, so that we can better tailor products and services to the needs of people with disability. Next slide, please. So, as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, digitalization will definitely enable to be more inclusive of people with disability, but can create, if not looked properly, other barriers, especially for visual and cognitive impaired persons. So for that, the idea is to follow closely guidelines about digital interfaces, making sure that we can have a simple design and language used, that we follow the guidelines from the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, which are few steps that all implementers can put in place so that interfaces are accessible. There is also a few other resources that we have in the presentation that you can go through to make sure these interfaces are accessible. And of course, always consult specialists and organization of people with disability to make sure that their needs are taken into account. Next slide, please. So in our journey to make financial services more accessible, we have designed a series of videos. You have seen one of them, aiming at awareness raising and providing guidelines to make a financial institution more accessible. So those are available. We have our research also accessible, and a manual, so replication manual that is almost finished, that we will soon share within a disability inclusion disability inclusive financial online hub, that where all these resources will be accessible. Finally, at our level, we aim at having sector level advocacy. We're aiming at organizing a workshop in collaboration with the National Association of Microfinance here in Cambodia, and other stakeholders such as the government and OPDs and so on. So that's it for me. Thank you for your time, and I hand the floor to Alison.
Thanks very much, Paul, and thank you to all our presenters today for giving us, these real examples of what Good Return and our partners have done to advance the inclusion of women and people with disabilities in financial services as an enabler to economic empowerment. So it was really great to hear those. I'm just having a look at the chat in Swapcard. So thank you very much to the audience for your attention so far. And please feel free to add any questions, or either in the questions or chat in the box there. So I know there's a little bit of a lag, so I'm going to kick off the question, I think, and just maybe ask if we can just summarize some recommendations that we could give to other financial services organizations to achieve gender equity and disability inclusion. So Shane, perhaps you could give us some of your thoughts and recommendations there.
Thanks, Alison. I would say my main recommendation is to make sure that you build internal commitment first within the organisation before sort of seeking to go out and modify your products and services. So, first of all, get to know the client group that you might be currently excluding. So do your research, but then work with your board to educate them, work with your senior management to educate them, and work with your staff to make sure that they understand the challenges that are faced by people that are missing out on access to your services. And do that by partnering with local organisations for people with disabilities, if it's disability inclusion, for example, because having them come in and talk to your staff and you going and talking to them about the practical issues that they face just makes it all real. And when it's real, then that acts as a real driver for change. People understand that, they connect to that, and they want to change. So, I think that's really critical. At Good Return, we don't claim to be a role model in this space. We've been on this journey ourselves over the last few years. So, we're not a gender-specific organisation or a disability-focused organisation. But social inclusion is very important to us, and so we've been going on this journey together with our partners over the last few years. But it's really it's getting to know and working with those local stakeholder groups that I think is critical, and that makes it real for you and for your team.
Thanks, Shane. So those are great recommendations, and I think some of the key points you made there, in terms of partnerships and how that important that is, and really just that it's a learning and a journey. Because I think sometimes organizations can be put off, as you say, by feeling they're not experts. But the important thing is taking this first step and, talking and sharing experiences as we're doing and collaborating with others is probably the best way to know how to go about doing that first step. But picking up on that point, I mean, I know it can be intimidating for some organizations or difficult to start. Let's think, and maybe Fifi, you could talk to us about this. What are some of the factors or challenges that prevent Good Return or other financial services providers from mainstream inclusion, the inclusion of women and people with disabilities in their work? Can you give us your thoughts on that?
We see three challenges that prevent financial service provider and support organizations from making adaptation in gender disability inclusion mainstreaming. The first challenge is the political will of our own institutions. How many of you have got this response from others when you mention gender equality and disability inclusions? They might say, no, we are not a feminist organizations, we are not an OPD, we are not specialized in serving people with disabilities. This is, of course, what my colleagues and I have experienced when we propose inclusion programs. The second challenge is identifying our own unconscious bias against gender equality and disability inclusions. For instance, very often people are focused on outward appearance, which starts with inner strength. It is critical to understand both the strengths of women and people with disabilities to fully participate socially and economically. Women and people with disability also have the rights and the desire to contribute to their society. The third challenge is influencing the political will of our implementing partners, especially financial institutions. To have inclusion endorsement from their leadership, our leadership, is a plus. However, it is a challenge if we still need to influence local financial institutions and others in the field. This commitment is evidenced in the leadership willingness to deploy funding and resources to social inclusion efforts. Support from funders, investors, and collaboration with local government institutions, civil society organizations like OPD, and other technical service providers enable us to influence those in the financial sector in the Asia-Pacific region to mainstream social inclusion and address their unconscious bias against gender and disabilities. Using our blended finance approach, Good Return provides not only investment capital, but also technical assistance services, which will enable them to be an inclusive and responsible financial service provider. This will help financial services providers be aware of their clients' needs, especially women and people with disabilities who have specific needs and demands for products and services. We also support them to provide SDG reporting, ESG reporting to their financial authority and stakeholders, and comply with the responsible investment principles in agriculture and food systems, which includes gender and disability inclusion as one of their principles.
Thanks very much, Fifi, for those insights. And I think it's helpful, to reflect on that, with the journey that we've been on Good Return and our partners, that, yes, there are challenges, but, picking up on Shane's points, really, I think, about overcoming that political will, it really is about the commitment, from across the organization, that really starting from the board and the top management. So, really emphasizing how important that is. But also, what you said in terms of working with others and collaboration is critical to overcome those challenges. So I think those points are emerging quite strongly, in terms of how to really implement and mainstream GEDSI, that those are some of the key things to think about. So maybe it will be good now to turn to our partners, with the case studies. And thinking about the point that you made earlier in the presentation, Shane, about the digital divide, that there's factors, underlying factors that prevent, women and people with disabilities, or barriers to them accessing technology. So, we've looked at the great work that we've been doing with Crowdy and with Shamrun, to make themselves accessible and include women and people with disabilities. But can I ask you, Fika and Paul, how do you think we can address some of these wider factors that are barriers to women or people with disabilities from accessing digital channels? So such as lack of ownership of devices, or lack of access to internet, lack of education, etc. So Fika, can I pose that question to you first?
Okay, sure. At Crowdy, we adapt to kind of approaches. So the first is we try to digitize the agricultural value chain from the downstream to upstream levels to ensure that women's youth, they can have equal opportunity to access for market and also for loans. And then the second, we also give them this kind of trainings for middle-aged farmers and youth. So we try to also encourage this youth, because since they possibly most likely they have this kind of like mobile devices and phones. So with Good Return, the loan guarantees that Good Return support to Crowdy, this can allow Crowdy to provide this kind of uncollateralized loans. So it can enable them to access the market opportunities as well as for capital. That's from Crowdy.
Thanks very much, Fika. Those are good points. And I'll turn now to Paul. What are your thoughts on that in terms of these, the wider digital financial inclusion for people with disabilities?
Yeah, well, from our side as a financial service provider, I guess the most important contribution we can make is to maximize the accessibility of our own digital interface to the needs of people with disabilities and other excluded groups. So I mentioned that we have this inclusion journey. This inclusion journey will, of course, cover physical, but also digital accessibility. So that's something we want to integrate in this process in the internal culture. This digital accessibility and the guidelines I mentioned during the presentation, which have been identified now, we will have to make it integrated by our IT staff, IT development, and to make sure that this is considered all across this work that has been done. This said, there is of course there is a limit of what we can do as financial providers. At the end of the day, we're just financial providers. So the work of lobbying, of building awareness, of doing advocacy, it's critical, and that's what we plan to do now that we're getting out to the end of this project. And when I say to the end, it's not the commitment we have towards people with disability, but more it was a donated, donor grant leaded project, which is now phasing out. So yes. For instance, today, the National Financial Inclusion Strategy of Cambodia doesn't consider people with disability. So through this workshop we want to do with all the stakeholders, the idea is to put them on top, or at least in the agenda. So that's one thing. Through having this inclusion manual, replication manual for others stakeholders, that's a key point for us to mainstream the learnings that we have gone through this project. So yeah, in a nutshell, this is what I guess we could do for making digital lift digital barriers. Thank you.
Great, thanks both of you for those ideas and suggestions. And I think it's useful to reflect on that, and what we're doing here today, indeed, and what everyone else can do is advocating for gender equity and disability inclusion. And just like to say, if others would like to join us in that journey, please feel free to contact us with the contacts that you've got through the platform. Would be great to meet other people we can share that advocacy efforts with. Another thing that's occurred to me when we've presented these great case studies of Crowdy looking at gender equity and Shamron looking at disability inclusion, but obviously a key, there's an issue there of intersectionality. So looking at the particular disadvantage faced by women with disabilities. And it'd be great, again, Fika and Paul, if you could share any insights you have about how you address the particular needs of women with disabilities. Fika, sorry, would you like to pick that up first?
I thought Paul wanted to go first because he unmuted first. Okay, then I'll go first. Okay, from Crowdy. It's okay. Okay, in Crowdy, we try to design and develop our system for the whole chain as inclusive as possible. So we are assessing the needs of like the women farmers, and then also assess the needs of people with disabilities, and we try to integrate that so we can have this kind of loans or products or types of financing that can suit both. So actually, in terms of like borrowers criteria, we don't have any difference between men or women or people with disabilities. We are currently don't have that, but agriculture is a very dynamic world. So we are still, doing the trial and errors, and with the help of Good Return, we can do these kind of assessments for value chain in women, and also how to include these people with disabilities into our agricultural ecosystem.
Great, thanks, Fika. And I think the methodology that you showed, in terms of doing the value chain analysis from a gender lens, I think really lends itself to developing further over time to look at segmenting that further and looking at particular groups like women with disabilities. And turning to you, Paul, I mean, what about in your project at Shamron, looking at inclusion of people with disabilities? How did you go about looking at gender issues in that project?
Well, just before getting to the project, Shamron is strongly committed to the gender issues. So in that sense, with Good Return, we went through a gender self-assessment process and develop a gender organizational plan that we're currently implementing, which includes gender equity and disability inclusion trainings to all our staff. So that's something, the starting point actually of all of this. But then as in our project, we ensured that the sample of respondents in our need assessment survey contained equal proportion of men and women, so that we took the needs of both gender into account and designed the loan and the approach, the activities, considering both genders. All data that we are collecting and that we are monitoring is disaggregated both by gender, both by disability status, by severity of disability as well. So that helps monitor and ultimately designing, let's say, further future interventions tailored to these findings. So just to give you a brief idea, we have enrolled in the financial education program 943 persons, of which 813 have completed the course. 59 of them are women, 66 have a severe disability, and 95 have at least some form of disability. As for the loan goes, we have 50. We disbursed 50 loans, of which 44 were for women borrowers. This said, this has to be taken with caution, in the sense that in Cambodia, most loans are taken by the households per se. Actually, borrowers and co-borrowers more of the time are is the spouse or the husband. So this has to be, you know, always balanced. Yeah, that's what I can say for now. You're muted, Alice.
Thanks. Yes, thanks very much, Paul. And yeah, interesting to hear, you know, particularly the importance of considering that when we're looking at, you know, doing research in the needs assessment, to make sure that we've got, you know, from the very start, a balance not only of, you know, when we're focusing particularly on people with disabilities, but that we have a balance of gender as well. And I think, you know, turning that on the other way as well, when we're doing research about women, you know, as Faika said, you know, can we develop that to start looking at, you know, including in the value chain analysis, and that women with disabilities as well, so that we really try and pick up on that intersectionality, which is a key point. And another thing I wanted to ask you, Faika, about, which is picking up on some of the points that you've made, but also that Fifi was talking about, the technical assistance from Good Return. So Paul's presentation talked a little bit about, you know, what Shamron was doing to embed disability inclusion in the organisation. So I wondered if you could talk about, you know, the particular aspects of your model that are aimed at benefiting women in particular in your business, and, you know, some of the activities you've done with Good Return, you know, to facilitate that at organizational level.
Okay, so one of the things that we have done with Good Return is that actually Good Return provide us with the technical assistance towards our the prevention of like sexual harassment, and then, you know, how to create this Crowdy as a safe working space for women, and we want to prevent like the child labor. And then so we did this kind of like training of trainers. So we got these master trainers that was expected to train other 300 employees in Crowdy, so we can implement this gender lens concept internally, and we also implement it to externally for our clients, for our partners, because farmers are our clients too, right? And the second is that we want to integrate the gap between the technological use. So we are using this gender lens investment from Good Return. From this year's project, we tried to build we already built the nursery homes, that these nursery homes for chili seeds, it can employ women, local women, the local people. And then we also built this drying dome to prevent any harvest loss or any harvest with low quality. And we also empower women to use it. So actually we integrate this technology, and then we train women, because mostly the workers for like nursery for the chilies are women. So yeah, that's two of the many things that we've done with Good Return.
Thanks very much for that, Faika. So that shows really, you know, the breadth of thinking there about gender equity. I'd just like to pick up a point that's been made in the chat here from Wisdom Alawusi, which is a great name. We all seek to have wisdom about this topic, and it's a good point that you make here about adoption of assistive technologies in the delivery of trainings with people with disabilities is critical to bridging the financial inclusion gaps. So I wonder, Paul, if you've got any insights about how we've done that, using assistive technologies in delivery of trainings. Is there any insight you can give there? I'll just pop that in the chat box of the Zoom so that you can see the point.
So what do we mean by assistive technologies exactly here?
So, I mean, I in terms of delivering training, I mean, I think, so I think an example, if I can give an example here, knowing the project, an example of this could be, you know, we worked with different groups, so people with visual impairment, in particular severe visual impairment and total blindness. And we actually have developed audio versions of our coaching materials for the cafe financial training. So that's one example of perhaps not necessarily what you call an assistive technology, but using accessible formats or different technologies so that the people with different impairments can actually access our training. So I don't know if any other examples that you can give, Wisdom, in the chat of assisted technologies in delivering trainings. But as I say, that's one example that we did use in the project.
Yeah, absolutely. We did this one. I think so. So you know, it was. I mean, it started with a pilot. So still a lot of things to be done, and disability inclusion. It's each disability, each impairment is very different. Each person with disability has different needs. So it's always difficult. And I think the key point of adapting the cafe curriculum, making sure that simple adaptations on the fonts, on the colors, on the game. I mean, the exercises that were used was critical. Again, mobile phones, digitalization. That's indeed something that will help us removing barriers. Transportation barriers always critical, and that can remove. So yeah, but. In any ideas, we'll be more than happy to explore.
Right. So Wisdom's just shared his definition there about assistive technology. So looking at products or systems that support or assist individuals with disabilities, restricted mobility or other impairments to perform functions that would otherwise be difficult or impossible. So I think that's a great point, and assistive technology can be used to overcome many barriers, in terms of, as you say, accessibility of materials, for visual impairment, and also physical barriers. So it's certainly something that is very relevant. And in terms of technology, I think some of the things we talked about, compatibility with screen readers, compatibility with those digital assistive technologies is critical going forward.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
I think
just to add one thing, that's the reason why for the loan purpose, we allow this to be accessible for potentially buying assistive device or fine-tuning an accessibility device, just because these kind of tools can make a real difference when going to the income generating activity. So, and again, each person has its own needs and know certainly better what is required here. So that was something linked to this topic.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. So that's really sort of offering the loan to allow the people with disabilities themselves to invest in the assistive technology that they need to participate. So that's a great point. Okay, well, I think we've only got about 2 minutes to go now. So I think unless there's any more comments in the chat, I don't see any other questions there. So thanks for those points, Wisdom, and I'd like to thank the audience for joining us in this session. And we have a couple of comments that said, it's really valuable to bring these issues of gender equity and disability inclusion, as we said, bring them up the agenda and make sure that it's something we're all advocating for. So thanks very much to our audience, and thank you to all our speakers and presenters today for doing that, for bringing these important issues onto the agenda. So thanks very much, everybody, and we'll end this session there. Thank you.